Hello, and welcome to our webinar on cybersecurity insurance, answers to all the questions you've never asked. My name is Chelsea Grover, and I'm the marketing manager for DAS Health. Before we get started on today's webinar, I want to take a moment to explain the process for the presentation. First, I'd like to mention that this webinar will be recorded, and we'll send out a copy of the slides along with the recording within the next week. Next, I see a number of new folks who've joined us today, so this seems like a great time to do a quick reminder of who DAS Health is. DAS Health is a leading provider of health IT and management solutions and a trusted consultant to many physicians groups, hospitals, and healthcare systems across North America. We offer a full range of business and technology solutions to help you in your practice, including consulting services, RCM, remote patient monitoring, MSP managed IT services, hosting, and obviously cybersecurity, just to name a few. If you'd like more detailed information on any of that, drop us a note in the questions area and we'd be happy to fill you in. Okay, so back to today's webinar on cybersecurity insurance. At the end of the presentation, we'll open the floor up to questions from you. We'll answer all the questions at the end, but you can type them in the questions area of the webinar control panel whenever they occur to you. And finally, for audio clarity purposes, everyone's phone will remain muted throughout the entire webinar. If you experience audio issues, please use the chat box to let us know so we can resolve them. And again, questions may be asked in the questions box. So without further delay, I'd like to introduce our presenters for today. Mike Spur and Heather Benefil are our cybersecurity team at DAS Health. We also have some special guests in from Inskyber joining us for a panel discussion today. Art, do you want to introduce yourselves? Art?
Yes, I was muted.
Sorry about that.
Yes, I am Art Gross. Let me share my screen real quick here. There we go. Can you see my screen?
Looks great.
All right. I am Art Gross. I am the CEO of Inskyber. Inskyber is a insurance broker. We focus on cyber insurance for small and mid-sized businesses, medical practices, and other industries. I'd like to introduce Tom Wisbowski. Tom, why don't you introduce yourself? Tom, I think you're muted.
I think you might be muted.
I was doing so good there that I gotta, hopefully I can bring that delivery. Again, Tom Wisbowski from Cyber. I am partners with Art Gross, and we specialize in cybersecurity for small business, mid-sized business. Within either has an E&O component to that also within the healthcare space and many other market segments. Mike?
And I am Mike Hauser. I'm a national salesman for Inskyber. Obviously specializing in cyber liability and E&O, like Tom said, E&O insurance.
All right. Well, thank you for having us. We're thrilled to be here today. So what we're going to go over, we're going to talk about the state of cybersecurity and healthcare and small businesses. Why all companies need cyber liability insurance and what that really means, the changing landscape of insurance, the increased need for cybersecurity being required by insurance carriers, the changes to insurance applications, changes to insurance renewals and what you need to be worried about, and then also talk about a cyber liability insurance reviews. All right, so with that, we'll jump in. Lots of stats here, but the main message of the state of cybersecurity is that small businesses are being targeted. They are 350% more likely to be a victim of social engineering, lots of employees, lots of phishing, lots of scams and trying to trick employees. 61% of small businesses that have been surveyed have had at least one cyber attack. That could be ransomware, that could be malware, that could be a data breach. And one of the eye-opening numbers is that 83% of small businesses have not purchased cyber liability insurance or do not have the right amount of coverage. So, we're seeing lots of attacks on small businesses, and a lot of them are not protected from one, a cybersecurity point of view, and two, from a cyber insurance point of view. And then 14% of small businesses said that they felt that they were prepared to remediate a breach. So, in summary here, small businesses are being targeted, they're being attacked. They don't have the right cyber insurance, the cyber security, and also they're not prepared if they are a victim. And unfortunately, criminals have figured this out. They realize that if they target smaller businesses, that there's a better chance that they can, access that business as opposed to larger companies. Larger companies outspend in terms of cybersecurity than small companies, and in a whole, smaller businesses are just a better target. And the reality is, a lot of times criminals will use credentials found on the dark web. Password reuse is a big problem. So if a criminal finds someone's ID and password, they will use that to get into the company, and then they'll figure out whether you're a small business or a large business. And small businesses have to worry about phishing, ransomware, account takeover, and all of those other methods that cyber criminals use to get access to companies. And the other thing, and I know we have a lot of healthcare organizations watching this webinar, that Health and Human Services issued a note last week saying that there is a new ransomware variant that is targeting healthcare. So although small businesses are definitely being targeted, healthcare continues to be a very lucrative and juicy target for cyber criminals. So if you're a healthcare organization, all of those stats that I mentioned about small businesses, it's even worse for healthcare organizations. Now, some claim data that we have seen is, majority of data breaches are caused by employee mistakes, whether that's, sending the wrong data or wrong information to a patient or to a customer, falling for social engineering, phishing, or business email compromise, scam. Employees are the leading cause of data breaches. And, in small businesses, there's lots of employees, and maybe that's the reason why there's such a significantly higher amount of cyber criminals or cyber crimes against small businesses. So the one takeaway from here is small businesses are targeted, employee mistakes are the leading cause of breaches, and it's something that you definitely have to keep an eye on. And now I'll turn it over to Tom Wispowski, or I believe that you'll be going through, why companies need to have cyber liability insurance.
Actually, I think you were going to turn it over to myself. Art, thank you.
Okay, perfect.
So obviously, it's very easy for me just to say, as an insurance salesperson, that everyone needs cyber liability insurance. But the truth of the matter is, everyone needs cyber liability insurance. We live in a digital age, and any company that uses electronic devices needs cyber insurance. Whether you're a sole proprietorship, small company, medium-sized company, or large corporation, it's obviously incredibly important to have it. It helps reduce the impact of cyber attacks and data breaches and ransomware. It's a crucial part of business insurance. It's a combination of coverages that helps businesses control the cost of cyber attacks, data breaches, hacking, ransomware, and even credit monitoring for if your customers are involved. It may help with cover your financial losses for data breaches and privacy investigations, lawsuits and fines following a data breach. And Art, if you can go ahead to the next slide. And it's typically excluded from your general liability policies. Actually, the amount of the research I've been doing online, the amount of cost in the last 12 to 18 months for cyber claims, because they were not covered under a company's general liability policies, have been just astronomical. And there's basically, when you have a cyber liability policy, you have two primary types of coverages. You have first-party coverages, which is designed to protect your company specifically. So it's coverage to recreate data or to recover lost data, or if you're dealing with an extortion situation or a ransomware attack. Actually, a common one is funds transfer fraud from a phishing attack. And then in addition to that, you get third-party coverage, and that deals with the fallout from a cyber attack on your company's client. And I kind of want to just point out that, everyone has this vision of, a hacker as some, faceless guy in a cave behind a laptop or something. But in reality, I mean, it could be as simple as someone misplacing a laptop or having a smartphone stolen that could lead to a claim. And with that, I'm going to pass it along to my colleague, Tom Rysbowski, and he's going to kind of go into the breach part of the program for us.
Mike, it was a good point, and it really, to finish that last slide off, when we look at the data, most cyber breaches occur from your own employees. So we talk about, and we'll talk about later, how important it is for employee training, right? Because that's where it's coming from. We do see the faceless hacker. So that was a great point. And now, Mike, you have that vision embedded in my head, but we'll move on. So what to expect during a breach, right? It's probably one of the most crazy time. You talk about the fear, right, of being instilled of, hey, I wish I had cyber insurance, or how do I react to this? Because it does feel, and we've had, I'll tell you, I've been doing this for 20 years. We've had more cyber breaches within our firm over the last 12 to 18 months than I've ever had in my career. And that feeling of feeling alone, how do I stop this? How do I move on? I can't work. What do I do? How do I notify, right? So it gets to be a very crazy time, right? So you're sort of trying, and Art put this line here in this next slide, but you're really trying to find that balance in that chaotic moment of, how do I recover from this? How do I preserve what's going on? How do I take care of it? Again, if we're looking at people within the healthcare segment, of how do I take care of my patients? What do I do, right? So the first thing, and I assume and I hope that most of you have cyber insurance, right? And the one great thing, besides leaning on one, your IT provider, but two, is lean on this policy you have. Cyber insurance should be the backstop of all these tools, and we'll get into a little bit of everything you're doing. But if it does breach, you want to engage your carrier, because in that insurance contract, that policy, you have to notify them of any potential incident as soon as you are made aware. So you're going to call them. Most of your policies have a 1-800 number, right? Or a claims number, or you're going to call your agent or broker, say, where do I go from here? And the great thing about that, every good cyber insurance companies, and if we talk about carriers that really write cyber insurance, and that's what they do. There's some carriers, you look at your State Farms, your Allstates, and these Progressives and Geico, but you really want to try to find yourself a carrier that specializes. They're going to have teams of people to sort of help you deal with and manage that breach. So they have a vetted professionals and will sort of take you down that line. They're going to have a breach coach for you, right? And mostly they have 6 or 7 vetted law firms that'll sort of be that point person, or I like to call them the quarterback, that's going to walk you through, and this is what we're going to do. So sometimes, they call it, and some carriers may call it a breach coach, but really it's a law firm that sort of you're going to engage, and again, at no cost to you, to say, hey, Tom, this is how we're going to handle this. This is our first step in this piece, right? And through this process, they also have people that are just specializing in doing the forensics. How did the breach go down? How do we stop the breach? Is it a ransomware attack? Do we have to go in forensically to see how someone got into your system? Where they're also
and the forensics is really important. Excuse me, Tom, because what you really want to figure out is, which patients, which customers, which clients have been impacted. Because when you have to do a notification, you want to make sure that you know exactly who has been impacted. You don't want to, default to, oh, we'll just send it to every customer that we have, every patient that we have. Forensics is very important in determining what exactly happened in that breach.
Yeah, so, and after we sort of start that remediation process, or that calming down of what initially happened, the forensics on the back end are going to help out, hey, how they get in, right? But then we're going to engage our legal counsel and sort of start going through, is there any regulatory issues that happen with that breach? How do we address those? And then we're going to go through, hey, if I was to Google your company after a breach, is it on the web? Hey, Tom's company lost my social security number or my PHI, right? And now they're going to handle, how do you handle that reputational management piece? Something you don't think about. Especially when we're looking in healthcare, we all see all these things with ZocDoc and all this other stuff of having these different pieces of reviews. And the other piece we're going to look at, we don't think about, is lost revenue, right? So when I say lost revenue, especially within the healthcare space, I had a practice in Arizona, had a small EMR, and that EMR went down. They lost revenue for a month and a half, right? So your cyber policy, not your general liability policy, your cyber policy is the one that's going to respond to that lost revenue. We paid out $273,000 on that claim. So not only about patient notification, but we look at that BI or that business interruption. Mark, can you go to the next slide, please?
Yep.
So we talk about changing landscape, right? And it's funny because when Art and I we've known each other since 2009, when really docs start getting money from Obamacare for meaningful use, right, is really where we start investing in cyber insurance and understanding a little bit better. And back in 2017, we start seeing an uptick in the market on how claims were finally being paid. But really, I think COVID, for all of us, accelerated these claims, because if you think about it, in the whole world had to get digitized within a matter of days. I think the healthcare segment was more prepared for that, but most standard businesses were. So because of that rise in claims that we start seeing in 2017, and then the acceleration of COVID, which we're still seeing, the premiums start rising because they're paying claims. Insurance companies are great companies, but they're in the business to be profitable. So they weren't getting the proper premium for what claims were going out the door. The next thing that we started to see, especially over the last year, is this reduced coverage or some limits. So when I talk to a provider or I talk to a business, they said, hey, I'm insured for $1 million. But you have to be very clear, $1 million isn't $1 million anymore, right? So $1 million, that's going to be your liability. But I really want you, and sort of work with your agent, pay attention to those sublimits, because now insurance companies are trying to stop the bleeding for where the highest claims were coming from. So social engineering, invoice manipulation, sometimes ransomware won't be $1 million. Sometimes it'll be $250,000 or $100,000. So that assuming that you're insured for $1 million because you see it on your policy, read the print and read what your coverage is. The other thing that's happening now, besides those sublimits, now they're putting deductibles on those sublimits. So say you have a policy deductible of $5,000 or $1,000 or no deductible. But when you get within those sublimits, and it could be a sublimit of ransomware, hey, guess what? We're going to pay additional $25,000 for a ransomware, right? So they're trying to protect themselves and sort of engage the market. The other thing that has been changing is this exodus of carriers in the market. When we started in Inskyber, we had companies all over the US, Bermuda, London, and then as claims and the anticipation of claims and how the market started to deteriorate a little bit, we saw this exodus because for a while in the mid to like 2010 to 2015, we weren't really seeing the cyber claims. So for insurance companies, everyone wanted to write because it was profitable business. And for those of you in the healthcare segment, you're seeing that, hey, I have $50,000 or $100,000 on my malpractice policy. It's not the case anymore. These carriers are getting out because it's not what they do, because they're taking on claims. So you're seeing carriers that exit the market. So when you do look at your cyber insurance, you want to be with an A-rated carrier that has the financial wherewithal to pay your claim. So next thing, which we're really going to dive into a little bit deeper over the next couple of slides, is the tools, the safeguards that you're putting in. I used to be able to get a cyber insurance quote for a business, for a practice, just give me your revenue, right? And that was it. And if I had your revenue and number of patient records, we had a quote. Not so fast anymore. Now they're asking questions. What are you doing for MFA? Do you use email encryption? Are you monitoring? How are you taking care of remote access? And the thing that's really changing at this point is we used to say, hey, here's my revenue, here's the number of patient files that we may or may not have, or just PII information, but it's going away from that. Now it's what exactly are you using? and you're almost signing off on different sections of the applications. The applications, and this is a great slide that Art pulled from one of our applications, are really trying to drill down. I guess, Art, you can sort of talk a little bit about this if you want to include, but it's not just, do you use MFA? It's where you're using it, and you're applying it at all levels.
Yeah, and as Tom was saying, in the past, we used to see applications that had 5 questions, 10 questions, or, do you have antivirus? Are you backing up your data? Do you have a firewall? And if you said yes to those, they would insure you. These questionnaires now are looking, they go from anywhere with 20 questions, 60 questions, they're 5, 6, 7, 10 pages long. So very detailed. And it's no longer, do you have antivirus? It's what provider of antivirus are you using? It's no longer, do you have multi-factor authentication? Do you have multi-factor authentication on your cloud services? Do you have it on your remote access? Are you encrypting sensitive information? How are you segmenting your network? Again, like that's the slide before, these carriers want to see that you have cyber security in place, and they're asking lots of questions. And one of the things, it seems like such a pain. Like it used to be very easy to fill out an application. Even last year, if you filled it out, the questionnaire that you may fill out this year is going to be much more in depth. But what the carriers are trying to do is figure out, are you putting in place these cyber security safeguards that will lower the risk of you having a data breach, lower the risk of us insuring you? So you have to think through these applications, really asking the questions to make sure that these safeguards are in place to lower the risk. And one of the big takeaways here is it could seem very easy to just say yes. We have that. Just we have multi-factor authentication. Say yes, or we have a firewall, and you go through and click it as yes and submit that, or check it as yes. But the problem is, you may even get the policy, right? Because all you have to do is really answer those questions, submit it, and you're covered. But the real problem is, if you have a claim, will the carrier pay out? And they will use that application that you put in and the questions that you submitted, the answers to the questions you submitted, and they will take a look to make sure that you have what you said you have. Which brings up a very interesting case of Travelers Insurance. And I'll take a couple minutes just to talk through it, because I think it's important. There was a electronics manufacturer, I believe they were in Illinois. They filled out an application with Travelers Insurance for cyber insurance. They were issued a policy. Sometime within that year of having that policy, they had a ransomware attack. It was a pretty significant ransomware attack. It impacted their business. They put in a claim with Travelers, and Travelers, as Tom was mentioning before, they sent in the breach coach, they did forensics, and they found out that although that the client said that they had multi-factor authentication throughout their network, it turns out they only had it on remote access. They didn't have it for the employees, they didn't have it for the servers, and that was the cause of the breach. Travelers turned around and said, you know what, you said you had multi-factor authentication throughout your network, you didn't have it, and because you didn't have it, you had that breach. We are not going to pay out on that claim. We're not going to, to help you here. The client sued Travelers, Travelers won. So I think the real takeaway here is, you have to be honest on that questionnaire. And it's easy to answer whatever you want, but it's really going to come back. If you have a claim, they're going to look at what you said on that application and what you have implemented. So do what you say what you do. All right, so Tom, why don't we talk through renewals? Because with all the changes that you mentioned, in terms of more cyber security requirements, sublimits and changes, what should clients be looking at in terms of renewals?
So it is an ever-changing market, but I just want to go back to a second. to be like, I think I'm gonna get that on a t-shirt of do what I say and say what I do, because I think we have something there. That's gonna be our new slogan. But again, as we look towards renewals, the market's changing, right? And that's sort of what we're trying to sort of educate on, that this whole market is constantly evolving. Technology is advancing so fast because that's so different exposures from a cyber perspective, right? So you want to get out in front of your renewal, and if you're using an insurance broker, you want to have a discussion with them. So we usually start 60 to 90 days out, depending on the account and how large the account is and how specific their exposure may be. But you want to have that early renewal discussion. Too many times, Mike or I will get a call to say, hey, I'm renewing tomorrow. My rates just went up 38%, right? And can we sometimes pivot and help? Sometimes, but really want to get in front of it, because our job and your agent's job is really tell your story. So to tell your story, you're working with this sort of leading into the next piece is the application with your broker and now it's involving your IT professional, right? You have a more detailed application. It isn't just as simple as it used to be. It isn't 5 questions. So getting out in front of this and telling the story of your practice, of your business, and the safeguards, the tools that you're doing, that's what's going to make your renewal, and I like to say, more stabilized compared to what the rest of the market is doing, right?
And then also, Tom, if I could jump in, you need time for your IT management company to put these, security measures in place that carriers are looking for, come renewal time. So.
Yep. And as you get that renewal, because the company's going to offer terms, whether you're renewing from the same company or you're going out to market to get a couple different quotes, look at the coverage. And I think I said this on previous slides, $1 million or $2 million isn't the same anymore. They're changing sublimits every year now. They're changing deductibles. Look at that. Work with your broker on that. And the last is the need for increased cybersecurity. What tools you're putting in place. And if we walk away from this webinar, the most important piece for me, as you approach this market and as you approach renewal, is it's about the tools that you're putting in place. That's going to go to the top of the insurance carrier's pile.
Absolutely.
Mike, you want to go over that last slide?
Absolutely. So obviously, I'm here to offer to any DAS Health clients to review any of their cyber policies that they would want to send my way. My email's at the bottom of the slide, obviously, my contact information. I do this pretty much on a daily basis for people. I'm looking at their sublimits, social engineering, ransomware, like we talked about on a few of the previous slides, and then just going over their coverages to see if they're in the right place and, paying the right premiums. I mean, really the best defense, I feel like, for, a lapse in coverage or, rising premiums is a great, IT management company and a, great, insurance broker. So, and that's why I'm here for, your clients. And like I said, I'm willing to review any policies they would like to send my way, and I'd be happy to do it.
Yeah, and just as a final takeaway, there's lots of changes. The coverage that you had last year, you may not automatically get renewed. The coverage that you had could have, sublimits. It could not be, as extensive as you had in the past. Your premiums can go up. The earlier that you start looking for a renewal or coverage, the more time you have to work with your IT company, more time you have to work with your broker. So, no longer can you just react, because you may not have enough time to put in the safeguards that you need or shop around to get the right policy. You don't want to be without that. As we said before, all companies need cyber liability insurance. You want to make sure that there's no gaps in time. So with that, I am going to turn it back over to Heather.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, everyone from Inskyber. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes.
I would like to add, while we're switching over here, that DAS does assist some of our managed security and managed IT clients. They come to us with these insurance questionnaires to help with you know, answering those questions, getting them some clarity on those questions. And, you know, we do these on a regular basis, and Art, isn't it right? These questionnaires are changing literally quarterly. We're seeing new questions
Monthly,
added to them.
monthly. Yeah, it's crazy. You know, it
They're getting
really
very,
is.
very specific, and we're helping our clients try to sort through that and understand what tools that they need to put in place to reduce their risk.
And one of the things that's important, Mike, is that, you know, they'll not only will the carrier ask, are you using, you know, firewall, antivirus, or MFA, but they want to know what type, because there's different pieces. You know, if you're looking at multi-factor authentication using text message as opposed to an application would be more secure. So that's what, you know, in order to lower your premium the most, you want to be able to answer those questions. Yes, we're doing it, and yes, we're doing it with the right product, and that's where DAS can really help, working with someone like an Inskyber, where you work together to make sure that you're answering those questionnaires right, but you're also, you know, implementing the right technology to lower the chance of a breach and also lower your premium.
Great, thank you. So we just have a few things that we'd like to review with you today. We receive a lot of questions from clients on getting ready for cybersecurity insurance or going through their renewal. And so we put together, we kind of group those into technology compliance and administrative areas to kind of think through as you're, you know, maybe thinking about cybersecurity insurance or you're headed into your renewal, just some areas and kind of talk through some of those questions and what they're really asking. And then we also want to just kind of overview really how you can come up with a good strategy to protect your practice. So the first area we want to mention and talk about under cybersecurity insurance readiness for technology would be on your devices. So do you encrypt protected health information or personally identifiable information stored on your devices? And then also, what endpoint security technology do you have in place? Mike Spur, can you tell us a little bit about what these questions are really asking?
Sure. So just like Art said, they're getting specific with their questions too. So, you know, if you know, they ask, you know, what tools that you use to encrypt your data. Are you encrypting your data at rest? Are you encrypting your data in transit? What are those technologies? We help many of our clients answer these questions and validate that they do have encryption. And it's important to make sure that you're not only, you know, laptops and server drives are encrypted. You know, this Tom mentioned, you know, something simple as a stolen phone or a stolen laptop. When we receive a report of a stolen phone or laptop, you know, the first question that we ask that really helps understand the significance and the impact of that sort of small event in a larger organization is, you know, was that device actually encrypted? Can somebody, you know, if the device isn't encrypted, someone can pull the hard drive and actually hook it up to another computer and read all the data on it. And it seems like a simple thing, but it isn't always. And how do you know that the device was encrypted? So it's really important to sort of understand those concepts. On the endpoint security side, there's all different flavors of, you know, antivirus. You hear it as antivirus, next-gen antivirus, endpoint detection and response. What the insurance companies are really looking at, and they know they've dug in, they're understanding their risk. They know if you have sort of like the home user-based, you know, sort of, you know, I don't want to name any names, but non-enterprise,
the free antivirus, or
yeah, the free antivirus ones, non-enterprise ones. You know, they're looking to identify their risk there because they are not all created equal. There are many, many good products out there. The one thing I want to leave everybody with is to understand that it's important to have an endpoint protection suite that doesn't just look at what we call virus signatures, because signatures change all the time. They change every day. It's important to have an endpoint protection suite that looks at behavior, that pulls in threat intelligence to analyze what's going on, that looks at your other devices, that looks at your whole sort of enterprise or all of your computers at once rather than just a single computer, because they can detect if there's an outbreak happening and alert you to that. So those items are really important.
Mike, Tom mentioned something which may not have really, stood out, but you really want to tell a story. Answering that application, as you answer that application, the more that the carrier sees that you have next generation, technology, you have a whole suite of cybersecurity, you become a much better risk to them. They want to insure you. They want to give you the best price. If you start coming in with, the free antivirus and the picture doesn't look like you are really taking the steps to lower that risk, you may not be insurable, or you may be insurable at a much higher premium. So telling that story and being able to work with DAS to show that, that we have solid cybersecurity is really important, and it really will impact the premiums and the ability to get cyber insurance.
Exactly, Art. It does tell a story, right? So these carriers, they look at these applications all the time, and I can guarantee you they can zip through that and very quickly understand, sort of at a high level, what sort of risks that we're dealing with. And the clients that we do help with these insurance applications, we do add that color. There's information that we can add that just, many of these questions, there's multiple technologies that can be in place to answer that question. And if you're showing you have multiple layers of security, that signals to them that you have sort of an institutional commitment to securing your environment.
And also, working with someone like Inskyber, we can work directly with the carrier to actually further tell that story, and tell that story about, the client, about, the IT provider and what they're doing for their clients. So working together, we can really help in terms of insurability and premiums and hopefully reducing that cost.
Really great stuff. So next we have under technology, we wanted to mention, checking your access. So I know we've mentioned MFA a couple of times. So if you allow remote access to your network, do you use a properly configured VPN or multi-factor authentication? And then also they're going to be looking at, do you have a firewall in place?
Right, and we obviously multi-factor authentication is a big thing, and as Art mentioned, what we're seeing in these cybersecurity insurance questionnaires is, myself and my cybersecurity team, we've been beating the multi-factor authentication drum for a long time. It's very important. If you don't have multi-factor authentication protecting your public access to your technical resources, which would be your VPN into your office or your remote access to cloud-based resources like Office 365 emails and things, your risk is very high. And the insurance industry is obviously measuring that. But they're also asking questions like recent ones that I've seen that are relatively new in these insurance questionnaires is, do you use multi-factor authentication for administrative access? So that is not just remote access. That is, if you have an administrator account or an administrator level account logging into a server, that now needs to be protected with multi-factor authentication, and there are solutions for that out there. On the firewall side, most businesses have firewalls. The big question is, do you have a firewall that has the security systems in place, like IDS, IPS, so intrusion detection, intrusion prevention, gateway antivirus, real-time blacklist. I can go on and on about it, but it's just important to understand that you have a firewall in place in your offices, in your locations, that have this next generation sort of technology in place so that they can just be that, that's sort of your front door, right? The firewall is at the edge of your network. It's your front door. It's also important in unmanaged environments that we come into a lot. We see this frequently is the firmware is not up to date, or the subscription, the security subscription that's that goes along with that device hasn't been renewed. So it's important to pay attention to things like that.
And if it's configured correctly, a lot of times
Exactly.
we see that there's a firewall that's open to public access, and Google comes in and Google and indexes, patient information. We've seen breaches like that. So, having a firewall and making sure that that is properly configured and managed is very important.
Not only that, but even if like you have a subscription to the thing and some of those security features, maybe through requests of users or whatever, are disabled.
Yep, exactly.
The next technology area to take a look at would be your email. So again, we're looking for multi-factor authentication for access to emails for all employees, and also additional features to kind of review and make sure are implemented and turned on as well.
So insurance is looking at this very closely. They've educated themselves on the security technologies that are available to protect email. And just to say, let everybody know, the most breaches that we see that we have reported to us are related to email, or what we call BEC, business email compromise. So somebody they receive a phishing email, they click on a link, they enter their, that says their Office 365 password expired or whatever, and they click on that and they enter their they enter their username and password. If they don't have multi-factor authentication enabled, anybody from anywhere in the world can get into their email. And then maybe it's a low-level email account that person doesn't have a lot of access, but what we've seen emails like that get compromised, and then that email is leveraged to cause great damage within the organization, with maybe tricking finance to change an account number for somebody's direct deposit or wire transfers and things like that. We've seen some really sophisticated operations out there to try to leverage a compromised email for money.
Mike, everybody thinks of ransomware, right? When you think of
Yeah, it's
cyber
not
criminals,
just
ransomware is that's the first thing you think of. Business email compromise, vendor fraud, that type of damage and very much financial damage is huge, and we're seeing lots of claims on that, and it's a major problem. Everybody talks about ransomware, but business email compromise and getting into employee accounts is definitely something that cyber criminals are focusing in on.
Even reputational damage on it, right? So, we've seen situations where like a CEO's email might get compromised, and then all of a sudden, all of his customers or their customers or vendors receive an email from the CEO that's not from him.
Right, exactly.
I've had more business email compromise claims this year and probably in the last 4 months than I've ever had. I'm just taking over emails, watching how they write the email, who their contacts are, and sort of using that to manipulate some invoices to get some money.
Right.
It's one of our big hitters.
Another, the last kind of technology area that we wanted to focus on in today's call would be related to backups. So how frequently do you back up systems and data, and do you store your backups in a separate location?
So this is another question, obviously, that insurance companies looking to protect themselves from loss, right? They want to know that there's a good backup system in place. True story here. We had a company reach out to us for assistance because they're having a ransomware event. So the first thing that happens when we're called in to assist to investigate, a suspected compromised situation, whether it's ransomware or anything else, we'll start looking at logs, but we'll also, one of the first things that we'll do, especially if ransomware is involved, is ask the company what they're doing for backups. Do they have a backup? What's their most recent backup? Because we're going to want to know right away. If you're dealing with a full ransomware event, you're not getting that data back. It's very sophisticated. You can't crack that. You need to restore from backup. If you don't have a good backup, that's a big problem. And
That's when you're forced to pay, right?
Yeah.
If you can restore that data, there's no need to pay a ransom. But if companies find themselves desperate, they don't have the backup's been deleted, and then they're desperate, and then they have to make that tough decision.
Yeah.
What do we do? How do we get back?
Obviously it's important to prevent that from happening, right? Because ransomware gangs are getting more sophisticated. So, back in the old days when ransomware started, and that was back when I started in cybersecurity when my hair was brown, and that was only, 7 years ago. But so they would run and gun. They would get access to a system, they'd encrypt it with ransomware, and they'd hold it for ransom, and that was it. Now what they're doing is they're exfiltrating data. That's why data forensics is very important, to get assistance with data forensics, because you need to understand, did this threat actor not only encrypt your data, which hopefully you can restore from backup, but even if you restore it from backup, has that data been exfiltrated, right? Because that's another issue. That's, you get into breach reporting and having to identify which records might have been exfiltrated and all those things. So
and HIPAA for healthcare, that's when unauthorized access to PHI is a major problem there.
Yep, it's very critical. So backups are really important in this particular case that I'm talking about, and we see this a lot in small businesses. They use a backup software on the server that they back up to an external USB drive, and they take it off site. When we were talking about this particular situation, and we were, asking where the backup was, well, it was still attached to the external USB drive that was attached to the server, which got encrypted with ransomware. So it turned out that they just stopped at some point, swapping out backup drives and taking them off site. So it's, the point here is really important to have a good, solid backup system that gets checked once in a while. It's good to make sure that you can ensure that your backups can be restored on some regular interval, so that you know
actually,
that when you need it, it's there.
And on some of the applications, they want to know, when was the last time you did a full restore or a test restore? So it's not only do you have backup, is it off-site? When have you checked that to make sure that you actually have data, recoverable data? So insurance applications are getting that detailed and how long will it take to restore the data? Because again, there, as Tom mentioned, that policy will help you with revenue replacement. If you're down, you can't sell, you can't see patients, you can't sell products. But how long is it going to take before you get up and running again? And that will impact your insurability and your premium.
And I just want to keep us accountable for time, so other folks might have a meeting coming up. So we will try to get through the rest of these a little bit faster. The next one, I know you guys were just kind of mentioning HIPAA and being compliant with HIPAA, protecting your patient information. We also, think a great place to check and prepare yourself for cybersecurity insurance is looking at your annual security risk assessment and actually addressing the mitigation recommendations from that work plan. So, we'll see clients are always, completing their security risk assessment to be compliant with HIPAA, to be compliant with any government incentive programs. But taking that work plan and making action steps to address any weaknesses identified is very important. It's important to do that, and make a plan before you complete your next year's security risk assessment. Is kind of a best practice. And then also, if you are accepting credit card payments, is the outsourced payment processor PCI or DSS compliant, and do you conduct penetration testing is a question that we've seen too.
Absolutely.
Taking a look at your processes. So last we'll talk about in administration, and what you can check there is, do you have a business continuity plan or disaster recovery plan in place? And how frequently do you test the integrity of your backups and your disaster recovery plan?
Right, and that's sort of what Art was talking about. They're asking those questions like, are you testing and make sure, do you have a plan? What's your recovery time? How often do you test? It's also important to have an incident response plan too, right? So even if, we were talking about how contacting your insurance carrier sooner than later when you have an unfolding incident, that should be part of an incident response plan, and everybody understands. It's very important to understand what everybody's role is ahead of time, because when these things are unfolding and in the heat of the moment, you can't think straight all the time, and you're not sure what to do. So it's very important to have that plan, game through it, understand who's going to do what if one of these events were ever to happen. Hopefully never, but it does happen.
And when you look at your insurance policy, again, chaotic time, like you just said, Mike, but again, that first you are obligated to report that incident as soon as reasonably possible.
And then the last area to, really review and think through would be, obviously providing your employees with security awareness training and conducting, phishing simulation testing. I think we've said it several times. Humans can be the weakest link, and training and educating our employees will help strengthen our defenses.
Yes, maintaining a heightened state of security awareness too is important. So rather than, a lot of organizations will do some security awareness training, on an annual basis to satisfy some requirements, but we found it very effective to keep an ongoing training program where we keep the employees engaged on relevant cybersecurity topics that are happening now, so that they know what to look for. Again, our users are our first and last line of defense. We have all of these other technical security layers, but humans are the factor in here that are important to, make sure that they have the tools to be able to protect your organization.
Yeah, and almost every application that we have asks, are you training your employees? Are you doing simulated phishing? Very important. Carriers know exactly what Heather and Mike said, that humans are a weak link and something that needs to be trained. And I like what you said, Mike. They're your weak link and also your strongest protection, right? And
Sure.
so how do we strengthen humans, employees?
And I'll hand this one over to you, Mike Spur.
Yeah, so how you can protect yourself, a lot of these things that we said, we call it defense in depth. So make sure that you have the layers in place, the security layers in place that you need to help protect your organization. So we talked about, firewalls, that's at your sort of public facing front door, but you need to protect your authentication as well. Another really, really important thing that shows up in these questionnaires is, how often do you patch your software to be up to date, or patch your operating systems to be up to date? And they'll specifically ask, like, what is your patch cadence? What do you do with emergency patches and things like that? Many breaches happen because of an unpatched system that had a vulnerability that might have been identified 6 months ago and could have been remediated, within a reasonable period of time. You don't have to do them all like right that day, but just have a plan in place to make sure that this patching is happening. Security awareness training that we talked about, good backups, we talked about that as well. But, again, to have a good, well-rounded plan, what if something within this scope fails? It's important to have that cybersecurity insurance policy backing you up.
Just some key takeaways to recap from today's presentation and the conversation. We really want to make sure that you have that awareness, your risks and exposures, you look at all of these different areas, and that you implement strategies to protect yourself and have adequate coverage to protect those exposures. We do offer services, cybersecurity services at DAS Health. We have technical security audits that we perform for clients. The recommendation is to have an annual technical security audit performed. So if you don't know the last time you had one, it's probably time. We also offer the HIPAA security risk assessment tool, which has access to employee HIPAA training, HIPAA policy and procedures. We have a security awareness training solution available as well that actually does provide the simulated phishing campaigns and ongoing micro trainings throughout the year. We do provide assistance with multi-factor authentication for that VPN access. And we do have SOC services, so the Security Operations Center, so 24/7 monitoring system and team that are available to look at all of the different logs of data and actually flag what are real events to be concerned about and look into. We offer vulnerability management products and conduct those penetration tests. And we do have endpoint protection products available as well. We will continue to be hosting cybersecurity webinars, so we hope that you join us next month. We will be advertising for that one soon, and please follow us on LinkedIn. I'll leave my contact information up while we see if we have any questions that we can go through and answer.
Absolutely, and it looks like we do have a handful of them, but if you do have any questions, feel free to toss them in there. We'll hang on a few more minutes. I know that we're at the time, but we'd be happy to stay on and answer them. So the first question that I'm seeing is, you mentioned claims from small businesses, but what about medium to large?
Again, I'll take a part of this question is that we get claims from small businesses, medium-sized business, and large publicly traded companies. It hits us from every angle. We're hitting more and more this past 24 months than we've ever had, just the state of the market. But yeah, it's not just SMBs, it's the.
Okay, great. Next question. Do you see cybersecurity insurance premiums increasing in the future?
And I'll take some of this, and I have to jump up. I have another call at 3, but I'll take the first part of this. You know, I think we've seen a rapid increase in premiums over the last 12 months, and underlying criteria for underwriting has changed significantly. We talk about the tools being put in. And Mike's will sort of take the second piece of this. You know, I'm hoping for stabilization. I don't see we're going to see the hockey stick increases that we've been seeing. But
I think there has been some signs of it stabilizing you know, recently. I think I've noticed that.
Yeah, we're just not seeing that big uptick in that hockey stick growth increase. It's sort of stabilized a little bit because we're understanding the tools better. They're understanding exposure. But the way technology is evolving so fast, it's sort of I'm going into this answer tentatively, if that helps.
Perfect. Thank you, Tom.
I have to jump on the call, so I
appreciate you joining us today,
so
Tom.
much.
Thanks, Tom.
Next question. Do we have to implement all the technologies listed in a cybersecurity insurance application?
I'll take that. The more that you have implemented, the more insurable you are. There are certain pieces that if you don't have in place, multi-factor authentication, you know, antivirus, there's a chance that you won't be insurable and a carrier won't insure you. There's others that you may not have in place that could help you lower those premiums. So, you know, the short answer or the long answer is it depends. It depends on what you have implemented and what you don't have implemented. You know, just because you say you don't have something doesn't mean you won't be insured or your premiums will go up significantly. So it really depends on the technology or the systems that you don't have in place. The more you have, the better off you are, obviously.
Okay, perfect. And it looks like this may be our last question, but again, if you think of questions after the fact, you see Heather's information up on the screen. Feel free to reach out to her. You can reply back to the email that I'll be sending with a link to the recording. Basically, any way you can get a hold of us, we're happy to help. That's why we're here. And we appreciate everybody joining us today and jumping in on this conversation. I hope it was informative. That was definitely our goal for here. And so please, you know, keep the questions coming after this. Let's keep the conversation going. So last question. What's an example of potential damage and cost of a breach that you've seen? Is that something you guys can share?
The potential damage is significant. You know, a lot of times you see the amount of an impact of a data breach is the amount of records that have been compromised. So, you know, and industry. If you're healthcare and you had 50,000 records compromised, there's breach notification, there's breach reporting, there's credit monitoring. It could run into hundreds of thousands of dollars. Large organizations, you look at millions of dollars. So, you know, it's expensive. You know, with insurance and without insurance, it is expensive. So it's hard to give the exact number, but it really depends on the magnitude of that breach. It also, if you look at reputation damage, customers moving away from you, patients not wanting to do business with your practice, you know, very significant. Downtime of ransomware could impact revenue. Looking at all those factors, all in all, it's very expensive to have a data breach. Much cheaper to prevent the data breach than it is to you know, deal with it. And one thing, just it's really important, as Tom was saying, you know, we talk to a lot of clients that have data breaches. It's really the emotional impact also. It is the fear of going out of business. It's the fear that you'll have to lay off employees because it's going to cost you $150,000 to remediate that. It's the fear of patients or customers that no longer want to do business with you or no longer trust you. That should never be minimized, because that emotional damage and pain may be worse than the financial. And you know, and one of the things that Mike and Tom are saying, you're making decisions and you don't even have information. You know, you want to get up and running right away and you want to make decisions, but that choice may impact something else. So think of it as not having. That's why one of the things that Mike was saying is, you know, you should have a playbook, because this is a very stressful time and it's not one that you want to deal with without having some kind of knowledge, some kind of plan in place. So long answer, but you know, that's I think that's when you look at the impact of a breach, all of that should be taken into account.
One thing that I found interesting when I was doing research was the average time to actually detect a breach was upwards of 6 months.
Wow.
And they said, I think it was even the Department of Energy pretty much is the best at detecting it, and they take up to over a month to detect a breach on their end. So,
Right.
Yeah, and they can do a lot of damage in that time.
yep.
Okay, well, it looks like that's all we have for today. So again, thank you everybody for joining us, and let's keep the conversation going, and we'll be in touch soon. Have a great week and happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.